Leaders from around the region gather at the CELAC summit in Quito, Ecuador to discuss many of the difficulties facing Latin America. Thanks for joining us for teleSUR English. I'm Cody Weddle, and this is From the South. Leaders from the CELAC regional bloc are meeting there in Quito, as I said, to discuss the difficulties and challenges facing Latin America and the Caribbean. In his opening speech, the Ecuadorian president and host, Rafael Correa, he criticized the unequal distribution of wealth and the history of U.S. domination in this region. Meanwhile, the Colombian president, Juan Manuel Santos, thanks CELAC for its decision backing the peace process in Colombia. The representative from Haiti asked CELAC to provide a political mission to help confront the crisis there. While on his arrival, Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, explained his recent decision to declare an economic emergency to boost his country's economy.
I've declared an economic emergency to strengthen social matters, to defend the people's social rights, and to initiate a new productive economic model. I've come to hold a set of meetings with brother countries, with brother presidents of Latin America. I've come to raise a set of possibilities so that from Latin America we can take care of Venezuela's economic emergency.
Moving on, Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman has been granted the right to communicate from jail. Now, despite his history of jailbreaks, Guzman's lawyers upheld the security measures being enforced on their client in the maximum security prison where he is being held. And elsewhere in Mexico, 16 months after the forced disappearance of the 43 Ayotzinapa students, social organizations and relatives of the victims once again took to the streets of various parts of Mexico to demand that the ongoing investigation provide more concrete results that ultimately could lead to the whereabouts of the disappeared students and bring justice to the intellectual and material authors of that crime. With more now, reporting from Mexico, here's our correspondent, Clayton Kahn.
With an empty coffin, the family of tortured and murdered Ayotzinapa student Julio Cesar Mondragon demand that Mexico's Attorney General returns the remains of the student who for 2 months has been in a morgue following further forensic analysis of his remains. His widow Marisa decries the lack of sensitivity that the government continues to display 16 months since Mondragon was killed in Iguala, Guerrero.
In the autopsy that was carried out in Iguala, it was mentioned that wild animals in the area ate the face of Julio Cesar, when that is not true. If they did their job well, all of this would have been avoided.
Meanwhile, activist citizens and the families of the 43 disappeared Ayotzinapa students gather in the Mexican capital to march. Many question the fact that Mexico continues to see cases of forced disappearances, extrajudicial murders, and violations of human rights 16 months after intense media coverage of the Ayotzinapa case.
We have had enough. Only a few days ago, 5 youths disappeared. What is the aim of the massacre that this government is carrying out?
The march comes only weeks before the state visit of Pope Francis. While many of the parents of the disappeared 43 youth express their devotion to the Catholic faith, they say they expect little support in finding justice from the head of the Catholic Church.
Well, the Pope didn't want to accept a meeting with us. As parents, we are not going to continue trying. We already tried once. We have more important things to do, like finding our children.
Although earlier this month the authorities announced some minor advances in the investigation under a recently formed special unit to direct the case, the families continue to express their overall dissatisfaction and distrust towards the Mexican government. They say ultimately their faith lies in a group of independent experts of the Inter-American Commission.
They didn't give the experts enough time, at least 6 months, because they had only just begun their work. Why are they creating so many obstacles? Why does this government tell us so many lies? Why don't they tell us what is really happening?
This month's march ended at the doors of the country's Supreme Court as the families accused the judicial branch of legally favoring Iguala policemen who have been accused or implicated in the disappearance of the students. Clayton Kahn, teleSUR, Mexico.
And ahead of the CELAC summit, Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa and Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff, they met at the Cardonelet Presidential Palace there in Quito. Both leaders agreed to boost bilateral trade and open new credit lines to increase investment in infrastructure projects between both countries. The government of Argentina has announced a hike in electricity prices, and consumers there have reacted, as you might expect. Although the new prices have not even been announced yet, According to the National Consumers Association, they could range from a 300 to a 500% increase. The association based their calculations on remarks made by officials. Those price rises could well lead to further protests. In the last few hours, another protest has been taking place in Buenos Aires against the arrest of the social leader, Milagros Sala. With an update now on that case, we turn to our correspondent, Leo Pobletti in Buenos Aires.
Day 11 of the illegitimate imprisonment without trial of social activist Milagros Sala here in Argentina. Milagro is, as we speak, still locked up in a prison cell in the northwestern province of Jujuy. But here in the city of Buenos Aires, in this country's national capital, more specifically here at the Plaza de Mayo, the city's most important square with government houses a few meters across the road, this tent you can see here behind me has been erected where in about an hour's time from now a documentary film showcasing the life and the endeavours of Milagros Sala will be screened. It is right here where it is expected that thousands of members of Argentina's popular movement will converge, people from the trade union movement, from popular political parties and from other social organisations will come here to demonstrate their rage in relation to the grave increase across the last 7 weeks of the criminalisation of public and social protest, which has grown exponentially since Mauricio Macri and his right-wing government came to power on December the 10th late last year. More to come here on teleSUR, so be sure to stay tuned. Leo Pobletti reporting from Buenos Aires.
Authorities across the Americas are trying to stop the spread of that Zika virus. Now, the virus has been spreading at a very rapid rate, especially in Brazil and Mexico. Peru has begun implementing controls at airports and border crossings. Paraguay, meanwhile, is providing some hospital tests. The government of Nicaragua has begun a massive fumigation campaign. In Guatemala, some pregnant women stormed a hospital to ensure they are not carrying the virus. Parliamentarians from the Americas are meeting in St Lucia. They hope to find a way to stamp out the harassment of women who are in political office. Now, the two-day gathering, they started on Tuesday. Our correspondent there in St Lucia, Alison Kenjish, now reports.
Women officials say the fact remains political harassment and violence against women in the Caribbean and Latin America persists. Parliamentarians from the Americas are meeting in St Lucia this week to hammer out a plan of action to address this issue.
What happened to women in politics, the comments that were made to them, get out, wait your turn, stop talking kind of thing, that is not a nice thing to do. I think it's wrong, and I think everybody has a right to speak, and I think we need to, by having meetings of that nature and highlighting these issues is what's going to really promote or help the women to go into the parliaments and to say to them, enough is enough.
Representatives in the Caribbean for the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women say gender inequality is particularly glaring in the political sphere.
For example, if a woman is in parliament and is told something specifically about her relationship with her partner, there is a privilege that the other person is working on around the fact that men are usually not asked about their relationship in those spaces. However, a woman's value is often defined by her relationship. So if we want to create those safe spaces, we have to address gender equality in the spaces of parliament.
The participants say harassment in political life ranges from subtle forms of intimidation such as sexist language to more serious forms like physical aggression. They say those violations of women's political rights reinforce traditional gender roles and male-dominated decision-making, noting that parliaments have an important responsibility to address this issue. Alison Kentish, teleSUR, St Lucia.
We now turn to Oregon and in the United States. That's where that standoff continues with the right-wing militiamen who are occupying a wildlife refuge. Now on Tuesday, the police arrested the movement's leader, and also shot dead another member there. Arun Gupta, he's a journalist for The Raw Story. He was close to that event when it happened, and he joins us live now on the line there from Oregon. So my first question, Arun, is just tell us what you saw there, or what you know there, and what's happening right now.
Well, we've been in Eastern Oregon for the last week at the where the conflict was going on when armed militiamen had taken over this wildlife refuge and demanding it be returned to the people of the county, the people who live there. They were demanding the release of two ranchers who had been imprisoned for arson. But what was really going on was that they were trying to stoke a rebellion. As unbelievable as it sounds, their aim was to overthrow the U.S. government. We spent a lot of time with them and talked to them. They never came.
We'll see if we can get him back here. If we can't, we will move on in our story here.
Can you hear me?
And we will move on. Hopefully we can get our room back there to explain exactly what he saw and what's happening there in Oregon. But for now, we turn to the presidential race there in the United States. That's where Democratic hopeful presidential Bernie Sanders has met with President Barack Obama. They met at the White House. Now, Sanders emerged from the meeting. He said it was productive and constructive between the two. The two men there, we know they discussed ISIS, relations with Iran, and other points of foreign policy. President Obama insists he will not endorse a Democratic presidential candidate until the party has settled on a nominee. The French Justice Minister Christian Taubira has resigned over the government's proposals to strip those convicted of terrorism offenses of their citizenship. Now, Taubira, she was one of France's few senior black politicians, and she was seen as one of the few left-wing politicians within the government.
Je quitte le gouvernement.
I am leaving the government due to a serious political disagreement. I choose to remain loyal to myself, to my commitments, to my fights, to my relation to others, loyal to us as I understand us.
Fidèle à nous.
An Israeli court has ruled that a Palestinian hunger-striking journalist remain in jail despite warnings over his deteriorating health. Meanwhile, in East Jerusalem neighborhoods, Israeli police are demolishing houses belonging to Palestinian families. Activists say that the arrest of Palestinian journalists is meant to hide the abuses which they are inflicting on the Palestinian people. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has sparked some strong criticism and reactions after he justified the actions being carried out by the Palestinian people against the Israeli occupation forces. With more now on that back and forth, we turn to our correspondent, Noor Harrison.
In an address to the Security Council on Tuesday, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon alleged human nature as the cause of the ongoing wave of Palestinian violence against Israelis. Although Ban condemned stabbing, vehicle attacks and shootings by Palestinians targeting Israelis, he emphasized that the Israeli occupation serves as a potent incubator for hate and extremism. In response to his statements, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused Ban of supporting Palestinian terrorism and shot back in what became a war of words. There is no justification for terrorism. Those Palestinians who murder do not want to build a state. They want to destroy a state, and they say this openly.
It's not the first time Ban Ki-moon makes such statements. He made similar remarks 3 weeks after the Jerusalem Intifada broke out. Ban Ki-moon is the top UN official who reflects the international opinion, and this is important to Israel. The question is, when will the international community and the United Nations be able to take decisions that can deter Israel as long as the United Nations believes what Ban states?
For his part, a secretary of the PLO Executive Committee, Dr. Saeb Ariqat, welcomed Ban Ki-moon's statements, which stressed that Palestinian frustration is growing under the weight of a half-century of occupation and a deadlock peace process. He also added that the international community should hold Israel accountable for delaying the two-state solution on the 1967 borderlines. Nur Housing, teleSUR TV, Palestine.
Meanwhile, Turkish security forces killed 20 Kurdish militants and widened a curfew in the mainly Kurdish city of Diyarbakir. Now, the southeastern region of the country is enduring the worst violence it has seen in 2 decades. The European Union has threatened Greece with new border controls with Schengen zone countries if it does not fix what it has called serious deficiencies in dealing with refugee arrivals. The Euro chief said the Commission was intent on preserving Schengen, which is one of the EU's key achievements. Excitement is building for the Six Nations Rugby Championship, which is set to be held on February 6th, and it will kick off in France. Now, Ireland hopes to make history again this year as the first team ever to win the championship for 3 years in a row. The reigning champs will face off against Wales in Dublin on February 7th. Nobel Prize laureate Orhan Pamuk of Turkey is a writer whose work has been made into a documentary. Now, he is also the first ever writer with a museum that has been created based on a novel. Pamuk's book is titled Museum of Innocence and tells the story of a wealthy businessman who falls in love with his poor, distant relative. The exhibition runs at London's Somerset House until April 3rd. That's what we're covering on this Wednesday. Thanks for joining us for teleSUR English. I'm Cody Weddle. Join us on social media as well, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll see you back here tomorrow.